Chapter 3. As the words fell from their lips, Su casually set down his bowl of porridge and opined, "I reckon it's the Princess Nihuang." Jingrui and Shibi jumped up in unison, exclaiming, "What?" Yujin, on the other hand, stared at Su with a resentful expression, and grumbled, "Brother Su, while I admire your prodigious intellect, this habit of guessing everything correctly is rather tedious and lacks a sense of accomplishment. It's really quite dull." "My apologies, I shall reflect upon my behavior and refrain from doing so in the future," Su chuckled. "Please, do go on. What more is there to say? We've already covered everything." Yujin trailed off with a sigh. "Is that really all?" exclaimed Shibi. "What utter nonsense the empires of Daiyu and Northern Yen are spouting. The emperor should have refused their ridiculous demands outright, instead of resorting to a public competition. Did none of his advisors counsel against it? And as for Princess Nihuang, how could she possibly be married off like a commoner?" At the corner of Su's lips, a faint, imperceptible smile crept up, tinged with a chilly air. "Indeed, how could Princess Nihuang be married to other country? She is no ordinary noblewoman confined to the deep palace chambers, but a talented commander who leads the iron cavalry of the southern frontier with her exceptional skills, despite being a woman. 10 years ago, when the enemy state of Chu marched northward, the Yunnan king, Mushin, who was in charge of the southern defense line, perished in battle. In his stead, Princess Nihuang was entrusted with the command, and she led her troops, donning white mourning garments, to face the enemy at the Qingming Pass. In a fierce battle, she vanquished 30,000 of the enemy's cavalry. After this momentous victory, the imperial court issued a decree appointing Princess Nihuang as the commander of all southern troops and charged her with the task of guarding the south in place of her younger brother. The princess had once made a solemn vow to the heavens that she would not marry until her young brother could bear the heavy responsibility of the Yunnan king. And even though she is now 27 years of age and still unmarried, she remains steadfast in her resolve to keep her pledge. It is precisely because the status of the Princess Nihuang holds significant weight that the decision to allow foreigners to enter the princess's selection of a spouse has caused these young masters to be greatly surprised. Jingrui was the first to ask, "Has His Majesty not consulted the opinion of the Princess Nihuang herself?" Of course he has, because the Crown Prince of Yunnan King, Muqing, reached the age of majority last month and thus the princess has agreed. However, she added a few conditions. Firstly, the contender for her hand must be the suitor himself. Secondly, she will not concern herself with the literary examination, leaving it to be judged by His Majesty. But the victor of the martial competition must personally challenge her, and only upon winning will they be married," said Yujin leisurely. As soon as these words were spoken, the two brothers let out a sigh of relief. Shibi cursed, "Yujin, you're purposely teasing us. This is much better. Most of the famous warriors of Daiyu and Northern Yen are likely already married and ineligible. Even if unmarried, can they really defeat our Princess Nihuang after careful selection?" "It's not necessarily a requirement to defeat her," Su interjected. "If the princess finds any one of them pleasing to the eye and likes him, naturally he won't lose even if he does." "I also think so," Yujin said with satisfaction. "You all know that the princess has always liked me." Shibi spurted out the tea he had just sipped, coughing and saying, "The princess has always liked scolding you. People like you who aren't very serious. The Princess Nihuang has been through wind and frost on the battlefield for many years. She likes stable and responsible men." "Ah," Yujin sighed, "Shibi, you are truly heartless. I almost finally had a good dream." "You're just kidding," Jingrui pushed Yujin, then said, "but this time Daiyu and Northern Yen are also dreaming. If it fails, there won't be much loss." Once it succeeds, think about it, not only will it be a political marriage, but they will also marry a military genius. Their reputation will suddenly become much more prominent. Su spoke calmly. It seems that both country of Dayu and northern Yan are facing unstable political situations lately, with various factions competing ruthlessly for the position of their crown prince. If any of their princes were to marry the Princess Nihuang, it would be as if they had already secured the throne of the crown prince. You have hit the nail on the head, Brother Su. They know that it is highly unlikely for the great Liang court to allow the Princess Nihuang to marry outside the country, but must spare no effort to compete for it. If they are fortunate enough to win, then we'll have the upper hand. Yujin agreed and said, I wonder who gave them the idea. It's quite daring of them to have the courage to do so. Su looked at him with great interest and asked, How do you know that someone must have given them the idea? Yujin shrugged and said, I don't like to analyze things randomly, it's just my intuition. Think about it, two countries came up with this idea together, and almost simultaneously put it into action. It's just too coincidental. Forget about coincidence or not, the bottom line is that we cannot allow the Princess Nihuang to marry outside the country. Shibi shook his head and turned to Su. Brother Su, in your opinion, who will win this competition? Su laughed and said, I am not a fortune teller, how would I know? Just now, you guessed what Yujin asked you and I thought you could predict the future. Shibi laughed heartily. Let me tell you the truth, Su smiled, I did not guess. I have already known about this matter for a long time. It's all written on this scroll. As he spoke, he took out a silk book from his sleeve. You didn't guess it? Yujin immediately became interested. Could it be that Brother Su is really good at fortune telling? The mysteries of destiny are not something that a fool like me can fathom. Su said, as he handed the scroll to Yujin, I didn't guess it, I already knew. It's all written here. Yujin curiously took the silk scroll book, and the three of them leaned in to take a closer look, all of them exclaiming in surprise. This is the royal decree written by the king of Dayu himself, seeking marriage through an envoy. Shibi's eyes widened. How did it end up in your hands? It turns out that the Dayu embassy actually lost the state letter at that county tavern. Yujin tilted his head and stared at Su. Brother Su, why did you steal their state letter for no reason? You're right, I stole it just for the sake of stealing. Su still smiled lightly. The Dayu embassy happened to stay in the same inn as me, and the innkeeper told me that they had a tightly guarded sandalwood box with something valuable inside. I was curious and sent Filiu to retrieve it. I didn't expect it to be just a scroll of official documents and state letters. These things have nothing to do with us, so I wasn't very interested in them. I intended to return them to their original place after looking at them, but they found out so quickly and made a fuss about it. I had no choice but to keep them. All three of them had witnessed Filiu's bizarre skills, so they were not surprised to hear that he was the one who went to retrieve the state letter. However, they all felt that Su's curiosity was a bit excessive. He even dared to go through someone else's state letter, without fearing any trouble. By the way, are there any conditions or restrictions for participating in the imperial competition? Jingrui brought the topic back to its original place. Yes, one's family background must be pure, their age should be appropriate, their appearance should be dignified, and they must not have married, Su replied. Is that all? That's all. Shibi exclaimed, then my big brother can also participate. Me? Jingrui was startled. Although I respect Princess Nihuang, I have never thought of. It's not that we want you to win and go. Shibi pulled his sleeve. The more people from our great Liang who participate, the less chance Dayu and Northern Yan have to win. You are so outstanding, you can certainly eliminate many opponents, and also help to screen out unsuitable candidates for Princess Nihuang. But what else? Shibi interrupted, I'm not good at martial arts, so signing up is a waste for me. You are the second young master of the Tianquan Mountain Villa, and Uncle Dingfeng personally taught you martial arts. You are at least a master, and even Brother Su has been guiding you all the way to the capital. Even if it's just to accumulate some practical experience, it's worth it. Shibi was determined and turned to Yujin. Yujin, you will help him register tomorrow. You don't have to worry about that. I have already registered him, Yujin said with a smile. Hey, you too. Don't worry, Su suppressed his smile, I know your martial arts the best. It's impossible for you to win to the end. What does it matter if you compete for a few rounds? Are you trying to comfort me? Jingrui was speechless and felt like crying. Am I the easiest person to bully? Shibi had another thought. Could it be that only the privileged aristocrats in the capital know about this? Shouldn't the outstanding heroes and talents in the common folk be able to participate as well? Of course they can. Yujin cast him a sidelong glance. This kind of news is hard to keep secret, and besides, the emperor intends to use this opportunity to select a husband for the princess and comfort her for her loneliness on the battlefield. Haven't you noticed that all the martial arts heroes from all over the country are rushing to the capital? The three of them thought carefully and slowly realized that it seemed to be the case, but with so many people entering the capital, they had not paid much attention to it. All right, I won't chat with you anymore. Yujin stood up and stretched lazily. I need to rest well and prepare to show off my skills in 3 days, to defeat all the heroes and win the heart of Princess Nihuang. Shibi cast him a sideways glance. This person is already talking in his sleep before he's even asleep. We should go now, so as not to disturb Brother Su's rest. Jingrui also spoke. Filiu has been asleep for a long time. Everyone turned back and saw Filiu lying on the bed with his clothes still on, his eyes closed in deep sleep without even drawing the curtains around the bed. He feels like a block of ice even though he's asleep. Yujin had just made a comment when Filiu suddenly opened his eyes, causing him to quickly point at Jingrui and say, it was him who just spoke. Filiu's eyes stared without focus for a moment before closing again. Don't worry, he recognizes your voice, Su smiled. If it was a stranger's voice, Filiu would wake up immediately. That's good, Yujin patted his chest and said, then we'll take our leave. Brother Su, please rest early. Su stood up to see them off, and watched as they left. The bell for 2 o'clock had just rung, and he stopped to listen in silence for a while, staring at the silent Duke's mansion in the dark night. After a long time, he slowly closed the door.